Good morning, everyone. If you are joining us today for our design thinking and everyday life talk, welcome. I'm a little bit sad because this is actually our last talk of the event, and I'm sure it's going to be a great one, just as so many great talks happened yesterday. So if you're here, you made a good decision. I'm here with Ritika, and Ritika is actually a product designer at Deloitte Canada. And I won't go too much into her background, but she comes from a background in industrial design, and she really has this holistic understanding of products, and she's worked in all sorts of various places. But she's gonna give us some good knowledge today, and she's a lovely individual. So we're in good hands, and I'll pass it over to Ritika. Ritika, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm Ritika. I'm here to talk about design thinking in everyday life. Before we get started, I know Rachel did tell you a little bit about me, but I'm a product design consultant at TWG, Deloitte, while also being a full-time master's student at University of Toronto, majoring in user experience design. I have a passion for creating digital products and services that are impactful, and my interests span from the tiniest of illustrations to the expanse of shared immersive experiences. Um, okay, so let's get right into it. Design thinking in everyday life. I already introduced myself, so I'm going to skip this. So, what is design thinking? Design thinking originally came about as a way of teaching engineers how to approach problems creatively, like designers do. With the rise of human centered design in the 80s and the formation of design consultancy IDEO in the 90s, design thinking became increasingly popular. By the start of the 21st century, design thinking was making its way into the world of business. And by 2005, Stanford University School began teaching design thinking as an approach to technical and social innovation. Indeed, many of the methods and techniques used in design thinking have been borrowed from the designer's toolkit. And it's not just a process or a magical set of skills that designers use to build new and exciting products. It is a state of mind, a perpetual perception of how the world operates and how we should operate inside of it. It is an approach to problem solving. It is a principle that enables you to bend the world and adapt it to our own personal needs. So, how do we define what design thinking is? Design thinking is both an ideology and a process that seeks to solve complex problems in a user centric way. It focuses on achieving practical results and solutions that are technically feasible, which means they can be developed into functional products or processes, economically viable, which means the business can afford to implement them, and desirable for the user, which means they should be meeting a real human need. The ideology behind design thinking states that in order to come up with innovative solutions, one must adopt a designer's mindset and approach to the problem from the user's perspective. At the same time, design thinking is all about getting hands on. The aim is to turn your ideas into tangible, testable products or processes as quickly as possible. The design thinking process outlines a series of steps that bring this ideology to life, starting with building empathy for the user, right through coming up with ideas and turning them into prototypes. Let's talk about the design thinking process. The process involves 5 steps, mainly empathize. Design thinking puts people and their needs first. Therefore, the first step of the process is to understand the problem from the perspective of the end user. You're trying to understand the way the customer does things and why, their needs, and what is meaningful to them. The way to learn about the end user is through observation and interviews, or conversations or engagement. It is a very hands on experience. Next, we have define. With the information gathered during the empathize phase, the problem solver is better equipped to determine what the real problem or challenge is. During the define stage, the needs and the insights that were uncovered in the previous step are cataloged and inventoried, and the true problem emerges. It is important to keep in mind that framing the right problem is the only way to create the right solution. The define step is concluded once a problem statement has been drafted. We then come to ideate. In this step, the problem solver uses a creative mindset to generate as many ideas as possible to solve the problem without the constraint of existing solutions. The objective isn't to try and find the right answer, which is something that doesn't exist. Instead, many possibilities and alternatives are explored. Some of the tools available for ideation include brainstorming, mind mapping, doodling, and so on. Nothing is off limits. After all, once you adopt the designer mindset, you know that you choose better if you choose from a lot of ideas. Next up is prototyping. Because design thinkers learn by doing, and they build their way forward, the best ideas from ideate stage are chosen to be turned into simple prototypes. That is, a physical or tangible solution is created. One of the key elements of this step is speed. The idea isn't to come up with something perfect, but something that you can test quickly. And the objective in this step is to get the ideas out there even before the problem solver might think they're ready, and fail quickly and cheaply. Last but not least, we have test. Once you have your prototypes, go out into the real world and test them. Accept that failure is a part of the design thinking process. In fact, your goal at the testing stage isn't that your prototype has to be a success, but it is to get feedback so that you can make adjustment and refinements to build a better prototype. The process of ideate, prototype, and test is repeated until the prototype meets the needs of the end user. You can go through the entire process from the first step to the last step several times. Iteration is a fundamental part of design thinking. So, how do we use this framework for problems in our daily life? First is visualizing your problem. Whether you're solving critical global problems or tackling micro level projects, visualization reveals key themes and patterns. Venn diagrams, flowcharts, graphs help you identify each moving part and draw intricate conclusions between them. The ability to discover patterns helps creative thinkers better interpret nuances in data and trends. The second is challenge common assumptions. This question everything approach helps you break down societal norms and assumptions to begin devising out of the box ideas. Imagine you're a city planner trying to incorporate more trees into an urban landscape. Typically, you may state your challenge like this: there are too many buildings and not enough grass in which to plant trees. By challenging assumptions, you instead ask a question like, what if we could create a way to plant trees on top of buildings? When you break down the very barriers preventing you from success, you take the first step towards a brilliant solution. Next is reversing your thinking and empathizing. Instead of getting discouraged by major roadblocks, think about your problems in reverse. This means turning a negative statement into a positive one, and vice versa. For example, let's say your main marketing objective is to create brand awareness within the millennial target market. Instead of asking something like, how do I appeal to this target market? You may reverse your thinking to instead ask yourself, how can I make sure that this target market is never exposed to my brand? The answer could never be launched, like never launch social media marketing campaigns, or never conduct marketing research to find current trends. By reversing the situation, you can see problems in a new light and decide what to prioritize. Another important point here is empathy. Designers often ask themselves, what greater purpose does my design serve? Whether your situation involves coworkers, managers, friends, or even family, you too can ask this question. Begin with a simple question such as, who else does this problem affect? How does it affect them? And what is one thing that would alleviate their suffering? By empathizing with your own audience, your problem solving process becomes more meaningful. In turn, you become more dedicated to achieving an impactful and long term solution. Next is embrace risk and failure. Designers are masters of innovative thinking for one major reason: they're comfortable with risk and failure. If you're committed to incorporating design thinking in your everyday life, you must overcome the fear of failure. It's only when you accept and even embrace the possibility of failure that you can create truly groundbreaking ideas and solutions. The famous inventor, engineer, businessman, and holder of no fewer than 186 patents, Charles Kettering, once said, if you have always done it that way, it is probably wrong. If you're a designer, an entrepreneur, any kind of employee, you're no stranger to the constant peer pressure to innovate. It is the secret sauce, after all the key to progress and success. Our capacity for innovation, the ability to conceive ideas which are once actionable and effective, is what gives the upper hand in competitive industries. The Apples, Airbnbs, and Ubers of this world were all born of innovation. Now, the challenge that all of these companies, and your company one day too, no doubt, would face is to continue that innovation in order to maintain or further advance to their position in their respective markets is challenging. Innovation cannot be a one time affair, it needs to be a part of the company's DNA. You also know that innovation doesn't come that easy. That's where design thinking comes. Design thinking has been long considered the holy grail of innovation and the remedy to uh, just getting out of something that is rigid. It has been credited with remarkable feats, such as transforming Airbnb from a failing startup to a billion-dollar business. It's a concept that's becoming increasingly hard to ignore, and yet, despite such high profile success stories, it's a concept that continues to be shrouded in a mystery. So, what are the principles of design thinking? There are certain principles that are pivotal to design thinking. These are reflected in the design thinking methodology, which we'll explore in detail a little bit later. We've I'm going to show you five design thinking principles, which are the most important, in my opinion. The first is user centricity and empathy. Design thinking is all about finding solutions that respond to human needs and user feedback. People, not technology, are the drivers of innovation. So, an essential part of the process involves stepping into the user's shoes and building genuine empathy for your target audience. Second is collaboration. The aim of design thinking is to pool a diverse variety of perspectives and ideas. This is what leads to innovation. Design thinking encourages collaboration between heterogeneous, multidisciplinary teams which may not typically work together. Third is ideation. Design thinking is a solution based framework. So the focus is on coming up with as many ideas and potential solutions as possible. Ideation is both a core design thinking principle and a step in the design thinking process. The ideation step is um, a designated judgment free zone where participants are encouraged to focus on the quantity of the ideas rather than the quality. Next is experimentation and iteration. It is not just about coming up with ideas, It's about turning them into prototypes, testing them, and making sure that the changes based on the user feedback are recorded. Design thinking is an iterative approach. So be prepared to repeat certain steps in the process that you uncover, like you would keep uncovering flaws and shortcomings in the early versions of the prototype proposed solution, and that's okay. Next is a bias towards action. Design thinking is an extremely hands on approach to problem solving, favoring action over discussion. Instead of hypothesizing about what your users want, design thinking encourages you to get out there and encourage with them face to face, engage with them face to face. Rather than talking about potential solutions, you'll turn them into tangible prototypes and test them out in real world contexts. We can have a look at design thinking in action now. Like, I apply these principles of design thinking to everyday life, and I find myself to be more structured, more calm, and innovative when it comes to looking for possible answers. Like I said earlier, we can apply this everywhere. For example, you may think your workspace is getting too small for you and your needs. And I know this because I have been in this situation. I found myself in this situation when I was working as well as studying for my master's degree in the same room the whole day, every day. The first thing is to think about the problem. What was the nature of my problem? Well, all the stuff that I had was occupied in, like, there was a lot of stuff in one small room. Why do I have this problem? This happened because I never wanted to give up some of my stuff and I did not organize the place so that I could keep it. I identified the problem, so I started to explore solutions. Only through ideation and constant generation of ideas you can actually find a solution to your problems. Write down each and every idea you have. No idea is stupid or crazy until proven so. I had a lot of ideas on how to deal with this problem. The first one was to move to a bigger room. Well, duh. Change the layout to create some space and some sort of distinction to, or like throw stuff out. However, I was going through the ideas and I realized I was finding arguments and critical points to almost all of them except one: to try and design a completely new approach on my place using smart design furniture. From that point onwards, prototyping was the next step. So I started drawing sketches and plans for the new place, trying to figure out what's the best solution to my problem. In this phase of the project, you don't really need to go to the users to test your solutions. You are the user. That is the best thing about applying design thinking in your life. You are the designer and you are the user at the same time. It's like being a designer for an application that designers use to do their work. You can jump around with solutions to your problem right away. The first item that I needed to think to shrink in terms of space was the bed. Let's face it, a bed can take up to 60% of your room. Naturally, I felt that this was the right place to start. Therefore, I started to work on a pretty two-in-one sofa plus bed with a lot of storage components. Suddenly, I had space once again, not only to move around, but also I had extra room just with a simple storage compartment. This was the first step in creating a whole new living space, a solution to my daily problems of space and comfort. We all have and develop needs in our personal lives. Many of the problems we have in our daily lives come from a particular need. If we're able to identify what these needs trigger or create the problem, we can apply the design thinking principles to help us come up with a solution that is best. We can do this with almost everything in our day to day life. If you think about it, it's always the small problems, the ones we don't pay attention to right away, which evolve into something bigger. At some point, that problem will start resurfacing and becoming a bigger problem that we have to deal with. Now, you might say, hey, I do this all the time, or that's the way I deal with my problems. You're right. We all try to make our lives a little bit easier. I want to find new ways of using design thinking and to make it easier to understand, follow, and most importantly, apply it whenever and wherever possible. Like I said before, we're the designers of our own lives. So naturally, I believe it's useful to learn how to think and act like one. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. I really liked how you actually applied some of those things into everyday life. Because I think it's so common for us to just use this term and throw out this term
Yeah.
as designers. And um, there's always like creative ways I think that we can be applying the design thinking process for sure. Um, we don't actually have any questions in the the chat, but I do have one question for you, and that's just what do you think is like personally the hardest part of this process for you?
Um, for me, ideation, just because there are so many ideas that come to your mind. And like I said, it's really important to have quantity rather than quality. But
Mhm.
sometimes we think about, okay, maybe this doesn't make sense, or like this is too stupid to be in my ideation board. And just to get rid of that kind of mentality, it is pretty difficult, even though it seems like the easiest thing out there because you're
Yeah.
putting it like a brain dump. That for me would be the hardest because even till date, sometimes I do find myself like I catch myself thinking, okay, maybe this is a little stupid to put in my board.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Kind of embracing things a little bit more and like actually embracing that creativity. Do you
Mhm.
have like where do you go for inspiration, or do you have any recommendations for everyone in terms of where you find your inspiration as a designer?
Honestly, everywhere. There's no particular resource that I go to.
Yeah.
Um, Even the simplest things that I see on the street, sometimes on TikTok, things stay in your head. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't have a particular go-to resource. I wish I had one, but I'm kind of grateful I don't because
Mhm.
it like opens a world of opportunities.
Yeah, no, it's like because then if you had like it's always good to be like, yeah, this is where I go for inspiration, but like really that's true. Like the whole world can be our inspiration, and that's kind of where you can come up with the most creative things because you're not limiting yourself.
Hmm.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think for everyone watching, if you are looking to kind of rewind and look over this again, or you're just joining us towards the end, we will be posting our recordings for every talk actually throughout the weekend onto our YouTube channel, and we'll notify you in some way that that's happening. For sure, if you're not following our Instagram, I can do a little bit of a social promotion, and make sure that you're following MDL McMaster, because we'll also just do a good summary of all of our events on there. And then that kind of brings us to the end of our last talk. I'm so sad. If you're a participant watching, good luck on your prototypes and judging this afternoon. And again, thank you so much, Ritika, because I really enjoyed this, and I'm sure other people did too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I loved working on this presentation, and it's something that is so near and dear to me.
Hmm.
And yeah, it just makes me happy.
It does, and like your slides are so beautiful, honestly.
Thank you.
So yeah, I saw that comment in the chat. I was like, yep, that's true. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good luck, and we'll see you later.
Mhm. All right.